Shefat Bilidai, may the merit of the Tzaddik Baba Sali protect you, and for the entire Kal, may HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'at Hashem give us bracha, v'atzlacha, and yeshuot, and may B'at Hashem we all see the hand of the Tzaddikim act within our lives in order B'at Hashem that we will all be able to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to do His avodah, to do avodat HaKadosh Baruch Hu, be'ahava u'b'yirah, in order that we will all B'at Hashem be able to celebrate a personal redemption, Geula, and a redemption for all Klal Am Yisrael. Amen. You know, Batai, every time there's a tzaddik that we celebrate his Hilula, it's very important for us to try to understand what the tzaddik wants us to relay within our lives. We know that every tzaddik comes along and lives a beautiful life. And every tzaddik has some sort of goal, or some sort of mitzvah, or some sort of inyan that he put a big focus on. And we think that that is one of the most meshubach, proper ways that we can all come forward, not only celebrate the tzaddik, but honor him. Try to lachko, to find his path. Try to see what he stood on and what he focused on his entire life, in order to allow the tzaddik to live on, to be able to still have a presence within the world. And that is really, Rabotai, one of the reasons behind the idea of an ilula. Ilula, Rabotai, if we think about it, is sitting down on the day where the tzaddik left us and celebrating. It makes no sense. The day that the tzaddik left us should be a day that we mourn, should be a day that we act with sadness. So why we celebrate? Rather, we celebrate what the tzaddik was able to give us within his life, what he was able to relate to us for generations to come, in the merit that lives on for eternity. So now, Batai, when we approach an Ilula of a tzaddik like Baba Saleh, we really need to understand what Baba Saleh wants us to act. How Baba Saleh wants us to think. What Baba Saleh would want us to do if he was here with us tonight, which he is. And you know, Batai, usually, we can look into the tzaddik's life, and we can find hints. And these hints act as some sort of like path that we can follow or investigate in order to see what the tzaddik would stand for when he was alive. So now, Batai, we thought about it a lot. And we came up with a little bit of a question. And that is, if you look at Baba Saleh's life, you don't see too many teachings. You don't see too many etzot, some sort of advices that he gave. Rather, you hold from the tzaddik one thing that is extremely prominent. And that is what? Miracles. At every single story you hear about Baba Saleh, you hear a miracle which is outrageous. And a miracle that when you think about it, makes no sense. It's like our cousin Abu Khatsira called us today. He said, Rabbi Moshe, we're going to do an Ilula tonight. We want the Rav to come, we're going to make holes in the walls, and Arak is going to fly. And I understood that he's referring to a famous story, that it said one time Baba Saleh was doing some sort of siudah, and the Arak finished, he took a nail, hit it in the wall, made a hole in the wall, and from the wall, Arak started to come out. Okay. Or we all know the famous story that Baba Saleh would carry a bottle of Arak, and he would cover it, and he would pour it to hundreds of people, and he would make it a point to show to those hundreds of people the bottle doesn't finish. Now, but tzaddikim don't do anything for no reason. Everything is calculated. What's the point of being, you could even call it, so, chas shalom, I'm using an English word just to relay the message, but arrogant to act in such a manner in which we show miracles like they are nothing special, like they are something that should be spread on, like there is something that should be told, like there's something that should be present within the eyes of the people. It's something very unique. What's more unique, and we see throughout Baba Saleh's life, those miracles are not even miracles that are life-changing in most cases. You really needed Arak, so you made a hole in the wall. You really needed Arak, so you took a bottle and you did a miracle that it lasted for hundreds of people. We can't say that this happened for just no reason. There is a purpose. Baba Saleh had a message he wanted us to take. So the question that we're thinking today is, what is it? And we came up with an answer that I don't want everyone to just take it and now space out, because if you will take it and space out, you will leave here with a very bad message. And that is what? Maybe we can say that what Baba Saleh wanted us to do is to know that it is possible, that we could, and that we should destroy the world. You say, wow. Where did this come from? Baba Sali wanted us to destroy the world? So that's Abatai, something that I would like to try to understand and try to break down. So in Abatai, every time when we arrive to the Ilulam of Baba Sali, we come to a beautiful realization of the month that we started. We know Abatai that only a few days ago, we started the month of what? Shvat. It's a beautiful teaching that the book of Yetzirah, the book of creation, gives about this idea of the month of Shvat. The book of creation quotes the Zohar Kadosh, that the Zohar Kadosh says that the month of Shvat is Mazal Israel. We know that every single month has a Mazal, has some sort of sign, has some sort of, like we can translate to luck. And the month that represents Shvat is a month that belongs to Am Yisrael. Where if there was any Mazal throughout the entire year that would represent us, it's not Nisan, it's not Adar, it's not Tishrei, Elul, but rather Shvat. And that is something, Abotai, that we would like to understand. Why Mazal Dli? Why the month of Shvat, out of all months, are the month that's considered to be our Mazal? And in order to even get to that point of understanding this idea of our Mazal, we have even a bigger question. And that is, it says in many places in the Torah, in Gemarot, in Midrashim, in so many different commentaries, that Am Yisrael are a nation she'en lahem mazal, that don't have necessarily a mazal. In so many places we learn that this idea, this concept of a mazal is not even applicable to Am Yisrael. So how suddenly we learn this concept that if there is a mazal that attaches to Am Yisrael, it's mazal dli? Wasn't it a famously taught teaching that there is no mazal to Am Yisrael? So how can we come to a place of understanding these two different concepts? Of one having mazal dli, being the mazal of Israel, and on the other hand, having Bnei Israel not even having a mazal from the first place. So in order to understand Sabbatai, we have to understand what this word mazal that we throw around so often. Because I think, Abotai, there is a word that we should all understand. And the word that we keep on wishing on one another, you should have mazal, mazal tov, mazal tov. What is mazal? What does it even mean? So Zohar Kadosh gives a beautiful teaching about what this concept of mazal is. Zohar Kadosh says, mazal, at its core essence, means one simple thing. Influence. Influence from where? Influence from an external place of our world. And this influence is random. This influence acts like the weather. This influence is an influence that doesn't necessarily have a reason or a justification for how it leads the world. Like what you mentioned, like summer, like winter, like the onot that is surround our world. An external influence that influences all of us as a people. Now, even in modern society, we understand that there is this concept of the stars influencing our world that create these signs that we know of. So even in modern society, you can come to the same realization that mazal, the sign you can translate to luck, is just influence from a place that is outside of our globe. The difference between mazal, influence, and all other influences, that it is an influence from above, that is not dependent on our actions. What does that mean? Usually, when a Kadosh Baruch Hu is acting with a person, giving him abundance, giving him good, spilling upon him shefat, or chas v'shalom, opposite, there is actions, whether it be positive or whether it be negative, that created that influence, that change in above. Mazal, on the other hand, the Zohar Kadosh says, doesn't need any action, doesn't need any reason, doesn't need anything that was done by us to cause that influence. Or in other words, like we mentioned, it's truly random. There's even a teaching that the Ramami Pano gives, that based off the time that a person was born, where he was born, at what weather of the day he was born, at what time of where the sun was at the time when he entered into the world, his mazal was already written. It was already sealed, and how the world will act with him and influence him within his life, whether he be poor, whether he be rich, whether he be successful, whether he be not, already gets put in place. On the other hand, the Zohar Kadosh says that Bnei Israel are the exception to this concept of Mazal. Why? The Zohar Kadosh says, because Bnei Israel are creations of choice. Bnei Israel have the ability to act on free will. And being that we act on free will, then those actions, those deeds that we do, obviously must change how the world treats us, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu treats us, how from above we receive influence. Zohar Kadosh says, being that Mazal is just an influence from above, it can't affect us. Being that all our fate of how our life will look will not be dependent on what was pre-written when we were just born, but rather put in place our actions, whether it be positive or whether it be negative. Mazal at its core is an influence that takes away freedom of choice. How can we understand this? So even if you take the translation of the word influence, it's not giving us the full picture. When you're taking someone, you're bringing him to a place of being aware, you're showing him all sides. When you're taking someone, you're influencing him, you're ignoring all sides and pushing him in a certain direction. Hence, in other words, taking away a part of his free will. Bnei Israel, at our core, at our root of who we are creations of free will. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the ability to choose, and based off our actions, we're able to define our reality, to define our future, to not depend on what was written for us when we were just born. But you know, Abatayim, this concept boggled us for years. Because if we look at throughout the actual year, we find that there is a concept of a pre-written influence that comes from above. Like we mentioned, Abatayim, Mazal is not necessarily a positive thing or not necessarily a negative thing. Rather an influence from Shamayim, an influence that is a nature of a part of this world that comes down to the world and pushes us in certain directions. We can't say that Am Yisrael don't have that. There's even a beautiful Zohar Kadosh that talks about this idea of Shabbat. It says even Shabbat is a Mazal. There's the Mazal of the seventh day. And the Mazal of the seventh day is Oneg. It's to sit down and to feel that we are dwelling in luxury and dwelling in rest and enjoying the world and enjoying our life and enjoying our body. We see this even in the Goyish world. Out of all the days they could have chose to find a day of rest, they chose Saturday. So we see that there is an influence. Or even the Gemara mentions about the month of Elul. It says the month of Elul, HaKadosh Baruch Hu influences the world with what? With the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we see throughout all the holidays, they're all based on an influence from above that doesn't have necessarily a place for us to choose if we're going to be influenced or not. Shabbat comes along once a week. You don't choose if Shabbat exists or not. It's an influence from above. So how can you say that Bnei Israel don't have Mazal? It's a little bit contradictory. It goes a little bit against all those teachings that we were so taught of throughout our entire lives, even throughout our day-to-day basis. It's a clear idea that Mazal exists, and Mazal is amongst us, and Mazal is something that is a part of our life. So how can you even come to this conclusion of saying that Mazal doesn't exist from Israel, and then in other places actually give very, very substantial teachings of Mazal applying to Am Yisrael? One doesn't go with the other. Rather, we found a beautiful teaching. That it's not that Mazal doesn't exist for Am Yisrael. Rather, that Bnei Israel have the ability to overcome it. Where Bnei Israel have the ability to not necessarily be born in one way and stay in that way, but rather be able to leave that Mazal and to come to a higher place. So we all ask, how? What is this idea? So the simple answer comes to us at ease. Through the Torah Kedusha. The Torah Akdosha from its root was always a tool, a vessel to allow us to escape necessarily our mazal. We read about it throughout so many different places. We want to increase our bracha. We want to increase our panasa. We want to increase who we are. We want to increase what we deserve. It's all through Torah. And this is something that we can start to see with Avraham Avinu alav shalom. Said Avraham Avinu alav shalom, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu did Brit Bein HaBetarim, and he gave him the responsibility of this world, the Midrash is something very strange. The Midrash says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took Avraham Avinu alav shalom out of this globe, and it says that he showed him the world and the stars in a way of looking down. Where suddenly Avraham Avinu alav shalom was looking down at the stars. For some reason, the Mefarshim took this idea and found it to be a source in which we can all come to the conclusion that Bnei Israel are above the Mazal, don't have a Mazal. It's not to say that we don't necessarily have a Mazal, but rather we have an ability to do what Avraham Avinu alav Hashem did, which is to go above the Mazal. And once we are above the Mazal, that influence is only going downwards. It's like we are in a plane and you fly above the clouds. The storm that happens below, it doesn't matter. So even if it could be winter and it could be a storm and at the time of that year it should be raining, it's the Mazal of the time. It doesn't matter. When you reach to a higher place of existence, what influences from a certain place downwards is irrelevant to you. Maybe we can say that the idea of Bnei Israel being lacking Mazal, it's that Bnei Israel have the ability to overcome it. So the question is, how? What do we have? What can we do? What makes us so special that we can be above the Mazal? So rather we came to a beautiful thought. And maybe we can understand it if we go into this week's parasha. If we go into this month's Mazal. We know, Batai, in many books, the Sefer Yitzira, Bnei Yisachar, it mentions that the Mazal of the month of Shvat is what Mazal? The Mazal of Dli. What is Dli? Dli in translation means what? Bucket. But not just any bucket, because today we use buckets for nearly everything. Dli is a very unique tool, a very unique object in the Torah. It's an object that is created with the goal to do what? To service water. Where the normal use case for what we call a dli in Hebrew was that water many years ago didn't come out of the faucet. There was a well. And in order to reach to that well, in order to reach to such a far place in which our hand can't just stretch out and touch, we would take a dli, we would take a bucket, we would drop it down, and we were able to extract water for all those who are around us. Maybe we can say that the only reason why we are associated, or we can say that our mazal is dli, it's being that we share the same job. We share purpose, and we share the same use. What is the job of the dili? To service water and to spread it to its surroundings. We now tell you that the Torah says in any place where water is mentioned, it represents life, and life is always Etz HaChaim, Torah Kedusha. Maybe we can say that the tool that allows us to be above the Mazal is the Torah HaKedusha. It is our job, our duty within this world. And when we service the Torah HaKedusha and we do our job as Dli, then maybe we can say that that's our keli. That's our way in. That's our way to reach to a higher place within the world. We see this also with all the Avot. All the Avot, the way they found their Shidduchim, which is Mazal. Or Mazal, we say Mazal, where did it come from? It was always near Be'er. There was always a well, no way to reach to the well. So what did you need? You needed Dli, you sent the Dli, you collected the water. All the Bnei Yisrael's Mazalim, all their Basherets, like we say in Persian, right? Were all found through what? Through a Dili. That's our Mazal. Serve the water, you'll have bracha. But the question is, what does it mean, serve the water? Why serving the water is the source to bracha? No, in practice, not codes or analogies. What does it mean? So now, we thought about this idea. We came to a beautiful little hint that we can find within this week's parashot. And it's a question that we ask nearly every year. And every year we try to find another angle in which we could understand it in. And that's this concept of the 10 plagues. We see HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a very clear goal, very clear desire, knows exactly what he wants to do. And that is what? Take Bnei Israel from slavery to Cherut. But we see that Hashem puts on a show. He starts with these plagues. One plague maybe would have been enough to release Bnei Israel. So what does he do? Strengthens Paro's heart, stiffens Paro's character, and continues to hit Egypt with one makkah after the next. Now what's even more incredible is that these makot were not just a normal makkah. Normally when Hashem doesn't want someone to have bracha, what does he do? Maybe he hurts him with his crop. His crop is not as rich. Derech HaTeva, nature, maybe doesn't rain so much on his field. It's a plague that comes from normal world order. We see that these 10 plagues, these 10 makot, were all complete miracles. Water turning into blood, frogs that were so loud that it said they couldn't even speak, animals losing their consciences, the erov, it says that the chicken thought it was the lion thought it was the sheep, complete bilbul in the world. Barad, Bechorot, Choshech, 10 miracles. Why all of this? Like we mentioned before, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't just do anything for any reason. If the tzaddikim don't do anything for no reason, imagine HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what's behind all these miracles? What's the reason of this entire show? Why 10 plagues do one big makkah, earthquake, say it, finish? What's all of this show that Hashem clearly puts to us and wants us to remember and wants us to repeat it and we mention it every single day in our tefillah? Why? So now, we found a beautiful Zohar. It can give us a beautiful little hint to it. And it can answer us, what does this mean, serving the Torah? And why, through serving the Torah, we can come to a place of above the nature, of above the Mazal, of above the influence that influences this world. How so? Zohar HaKadosh says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to release Bnei Israel from Egypt, he needed and he wanted to bring down new laws, new chokim, that these laws will be laws that the world must obey. Not necessarily people, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu's creation as a whole. Zohar HaKadosh says, but there was a big ba'aya. What's the ba'aya? When HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, he spoke 10 phrases. Aseret hama'amarim. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Vayavdil Elokim ben ha'or leben ha'choshech. 10 sentences. These 10 sentences was the laws of nature. Derech HaTeva. The laws in which this world will function in. Zohar HaKadosh says, the laws of nature at that period of when the world was the only laws that existed within the world. There was no other laws except for Derech HaTeva. Derech HaTeva, the way of the nature, was Hashem's desire. It was the Torah that existed. Hashem said 10 phrases, 10 sentences, the world formed itself and the world stood in that manner. Zohar HaKadosh says, now HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to bring something that is new. A new teaching, a new set of laws, something that will necessarily be an additive that could potentially change the laws of nature. Zohar HaKadosh says, what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu need to do? He needed to weaken those laws. He needed to cause the laws of nature have some weakness within them, have some wiggle room within them, in order to be able to install from the first place a new set of laws. How do you weaken nature?
It changes.
A miracle. A miracle at its core is something that goes against, in definition, a miracle, in definition, is something that goes against the laws of nature. If it went with the laws of nature, it's not a miracle, it's an occurrence. What makes a miracle so special is that it's something that goes against the norm. Zohar HaKadosh says, by bringing the Aseret HaMakot, by bringing the 10 plagues, 10 miracles, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made space, made the nature flexible enough in which now we could install a new 10 rules. A set of new chokim in which the world must function. What was this new 10 that were placed? No, what was the new 10 that was brought to the world? Aseret Hadibrot. The 10 commandments. And the 10 commandments from the beginning were always meant to act as what? As a new set of rules that exist but belong only to one group. It's who? To the Jewish nation. To Bnei Israel. The difference is, this new set of rules doesn't obey by the rules of this world. Why? Because it is a new set of rules that don't belong to it. That were not made for it. It's a new set of rules that don't have any necessarily a constraint to our physical world. Then obviously, there are a set of rules that don't follow or obey by the rules of this world. At its core, the 10 commandments were always given to us, Bnei Israel, not to just be another 10 rules, but 10 rules that we can use to challenge the 10 rules that existed before it. And that is what? The laws of nature. We see this even with the structure of how we call Aseret HaMa'amarot and Aseret HaDibrot. Aseret HaMa'amarot is a ma'amar. What's a ma'amar? A sentence. An announcement. Nachon? Announcement is something that doesn't necessarily be clear on who's announcing. Nachon? Announcing is general. And an announcement is not something that necessarily needs to apply to everyone. Announcement is something that is broad. One announces, nothing else could follow afterwards. Rather, the dibrot, even in English, we translate it to what? Commandment. Why commandment? It doesn't even translate to commandment. Because from the core of what the dibrot represent, it's the ability to command. A commandment will always be more powerful than an announcement. When you make an announcement, some people will listen, some people will not. It's not maybe applicable to all. But when someone gets commanded, especially when it's commanded from a Kadosh Baruch Hu, from a higher place, it must be fulfilled. The difference is that power of commandment was given to who? Was given to all of us. Given us to attach to it, given us to worship it, given us to us to service it, given to us in order to make it ours. If we attach ourselves to something that is beyond our world, it doesn't obey by the rules of our world, then obviously we will also attach ourselves to something that is above our world's limitations. And we see this, Rabotai, as a concept that is present throughout so many stories and so many teachings throughout the Torah. There's even the famous story, it's one of our famous stories in the Shas, Masachet Avodah Zarah, page Yud Gimel, if I'm not mistaken, of the story of the Romaim and the Yevanim. The Gemara says that the Romaim and the Yevanim were very smart nations. And not only that they were smart, but they were very powerful. It says that the Romaim and the Yevanim fought wars with one another. But being that they were such proper opponents for one another, every time they went to war, all the soldiers of the Yevanim died, all the soldiers of the Romaim died, and no one came out victorious. The Gemara says it happened 20-something times, where they went to war, nobody won. He said the Romaim sat down and they said, what are we going to do? Physically, if we do numbers and statistics, it doesn't add up that we're going to win. We'll keep on sending all our men, and all our men will keep on getting destroyed because it just doesn't work with one another. They're powerful, we are powerful. It says the Romaim said, we have to find some sort of solution. We have to find something that will be able to get us to have an advantage, to change the odds. It says they came up with an idea. What was the idea? They were smart people. They said, there's a nation that clearly have a gift. That this nation worships something very special. And that this nation, through its worship of this something that's very special, will give us an advantage to win any nation. It says that the Romans sent out a letter to Bnei Israel. He said, listen, let's make a deal. We will worship you. You worship the Torah. We will be successful. And the deal is that wherever we will be kings, you will be ministers. Wherever we will be ministers, we will be kings. A partnership. Unfortunately, it says Bnei Israel agreed. Immediately, the Romans took a letter. They started to write. They said to the Greeks, we have a riddle for you. Answer us a question. They asked the question. They said, if you have a ruby and a diamond, who serves who? The Greeks, they said, what is this question? Obviously, the diamond is more valuable than the ruby. The diamond will be served by the ruby, and the ruby will serve the diamond. What is more superior will be served. It says when they got the answer, the woman sent another riddle. They said, what if there's a very expensive diamond and a lesser diamond? Who will serve who? So the Gemara says that the Greeks said, the Romans lost their minds. Obviously, what's more valuable will serve what's less valuable. So the Romans said, if so, now it's a statement. That's another question. So what about if you have a Sefer Torah and a very expensive diamond? Who serves who? The Gemara says that the Greeks said, obviously, the very expensive diamond will serve the Torah, and the Torah will be served. So the Romans sent a statement, and they said, now there is a new structure that exists. We are the very expensive diamond. We are serving Bnei Israel. Bnei Israel are serving the Torah, and if that's the case, you need to serve us. We see that even in ancient empires, they understood that our job and our way of reaching to bracha is doing what? It's being a dli. It's being a bucket. And fulfilling our work and our job as the one who serves water. And when we serve water, we truly are able to exist in a world that is above the nature. In Abutai, we were made as a nation to not necessarily be a nation that follows a specific set of rules. We were made as a nation from its core to be something that goes against the way that the world functions. And all of that was always thanks to one gift HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. It was a gift that was given to us, which is the Torah HaKadoshah. And when we connect ourselves to the Torah HaKadoshah, it doesn't matter what set of rules or structure Hashem put in place for the way that the world should function, nature. We're above it all. We see this, Rabotai, and this is such an obvious thing that I don't understand why we're not learning it more. How we were all born. You know, Rabotai, we're not supposed to exist. As a nation, Derech HaTeva, none of us should be here. So everyone's thinking, Eretz Israel, safety, protection. No. If we look at our ancestors, you see one thing that's very common. And that is all our ancestors were born what? They were born barren. What does that mean? They were all born akarim. Couldn't have children. How can you bring people in which you plan to build a nation from them and make them forbearing? It goes against all the logic. So there are two ways of explaining this. It's number one, saying that we were not supposed to exist. We were not supposed to be born. Or rather, the only way we would be able to have a purpose within this world is if we exist above the nature. Because according to the nature, we all shouldn't be here. The only way we can serve the Torah is if we understand that our job is to be above the nature. And if we think that we should exist within the laws of nature, then we lose our purpose. We lose our power. We lose what makes us so special. We lose what gives us the ability to define all odds and all statistics that you could imagine. Our gift within this world is the ability to have every single step of our life be something that goes above the structure that Hashem made at first. We see this when we were all born. You know, but there's so many teachings as well, which talk about this idea of how unnatural it is to take your child on the 8th day and to start chopping pieces off of him. What's this idea? Especially when the concept of Brit is to to build a new nation, to build a bloodline, and then you do something that is significant of sacrificing it. What's the point behind it? So all the Mefashim, they say the idea of sacrifice is of the Brit Milah is sacrifice, or in other words, something that is not normal, something that is truly above the nature. In all of us, Rabotai, a spark of the ability to define all arts and to climb to a level where this world does not affect us. We all have a spark of it. And we all have the ability to tap into it within our own lives. Rabotai, our job is not to be normal. And if we are looking around the world and trying to learn something or trying to be like some of the other nations, we will lose who we are. And truly we will be born with a set Mazal, with a set destiny, and there will be no way for us to change it. What gives us the ability to be so unique is how different we are from everyone else. It's not normal to not work on Shabbat. It's not normal to only eat kasher. It's not normal to do all the tefillot that we do. It's not normal to give tzedakah. Why would you work to give 10% of it away? It's not normal to keep Torah and mitzvot. But what makes it so unnormal is also what gives it its value and what gives it such a dramatic effect within our life. He said, Batai, maybe you can say that is the idea of Baba Saleh. Baba Saleh made one thing very clear, and that he's wanted to show off miracles. Why? What's the idea of wanting to show off these? You can even go as far as calling them ridiculous miracles. Arak from the walls, a bottle that never finishes. Why? Maybe you can say he wanted to show us one thing, what we could do, which is defying nature, and what we should do. Defying nature. Because that's why we are here. As a nation, we wouldn't be here if we didn't defy nature. So, Abatai, if we want to truly live above the Mazal, live above the laws of nature, live above all the influences that is around us, recession, not recession, whatever occurs in the world, we have to attach ourselves to something that takes us very high. And regardless of how big the storm will be, and regardless if it's summer or it's winter, we are sure that we will always be what? In a good place. So Be'ezrat Hashem, may the merit of Baba Saleh give us the ability to feel, to know that miracles are possible, and to know that Be'ezrat Hashem, our job is to truly bring to this world one big defiance of nature and how it should function. So Be'ezrat Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu give everyone bracha v'atzlacha and big siyata dishmaya, and then we all Be'ezrat Hashem see nisim and niflot within our lives. Amen.